Hello everyone, this is Ben, and in today's video we're going to give you proof for God's existence. More specifically, proof for God's existence on the basis of the first cause, that there must be a first cause of reality. And more specifically, this is the first cause argument that's based on a beginning of time, also known as the Kalam cosmological argument. So we'll start with that. Okay, time. Now, it's popular among teenagers today to say that time is an illusion. So you kind of have to deal with that when you go through this argument, because what we're going to do is we're going to argue on the basis of two things: logical reasoning and the existence of time, and show that therefore God must exist. And you say, well, how does that work? Well, if you don't know, then please listen. So we need there to be such a thing as time for this argument to work. So it is common among teenagers today to say that there's no such thing as time. Usually you can respond, and I borrowed this from actually the Joe Rogan podcast. But Joe Rogan's, he had a girl on there, or a woman, and she said that there was no such thing as time. Time is an illusion. So he said, why don't you hold your breath 5 minutes and tell me if 5 minutes have passed, or let's just say that you go underwater and hold your breath for 1 minute or 30 minutes. What difference does it make? Because there's no such thing as the difference between 1 minute and 30 minutes. It's all just a man-made concept. I think most of us would understand that, yeah, okay, there is such a thing as time, and most people are ready to move forward with you. The worst what teenagers are really saying is that the idea of hours and minutes and seconds is man-made. They don't understand that, that's the unit of measurement, but that's not time. And so they think that, so in other words, they say we could, measure feet. We could, instead of using feet, we could use meters. So distance is man-made. It's like, no, distance isn't man-made. That's just the man-made measuring system. And so it's actually really popular among teenagers to say that time is an illusion. But anyway, if you can move past that, you do get some hard-nosed people who will really, sort of pat themselves on the back as, they're the smart atheists, or I've had Christians, people who went to Bible colleges, who also believe what smart atheists say. And so they insist that time is an illusion. And so that's one of the first things we need to deal with. Is time an illusion? So it's like this. What they're saying is that time is unreal, although it appears to be real. You experience time, but in reality, time is unreal. So what is time? Well, time is the continuum on which events happen linearly. So you got up this morning, ate breakfast, went to work, came home, ate supper. Those are 3 events. Get up and eat breakfast, work, come home, eat supper. Those are 3 events. Those events happen one event, and then that event occurs and is in the past, and then the next event is present, and then we move forward to the future event. And so that's a continuum on which events happen linearly or sequentially, one after the other in a sequence. Now, if that's an illusion, then what that means is all of those events are all actually simultaneous. They all occur at the same time. And there is no sequential ordering of events in a linear line of time, but rather the line of time is what's called, in traditional theology, the block theory of time. So it's this idea that, time is just one big block, and all of the events actually happen at the same time. So, you're in kindergarten right now, and you're getting married, and you're dying, and you're graduating from high school, and all of those events are all actually happening right now. But your experience of time is just at a particular point in that larger block. So this is the more, I guess, scholarly way to say, that time is an illusion and there's no such thing as time. So the thing about this is, think about that block theory of time, that, there's just a big block, the B theory of time, the block theory of time. The important thing to understand is you are still moving through the block. Your reality that you experience is real. You experience where you are in that larger block. You are moving through the block. So the question is, how long has that process been going on? Because for you, for your personal experience, even if there is a larger reality where time is actually unreal, for you it is a direct experience of that larger block. Does that make sense? So like, this is, when I say does that make sense, because this is kind of a philosophical concept to think about. And so it's actually a theological concept. In other words, when they say that, well, there's a larger reality where there's no such thing as time, but time is just what you experience, that's actually what this argument that I'm giving to you already says. Because the argument that I'm giving to you is, simply put, hey, God exists beyond time, and that's the larger reality, but He created a smaller realm of existence within time, where we move through the larger block of time. But if you understand that, you say, like, yeah, okay, my experience is one of those events in the block of time after the other, instead of all of them at the same time. And you say, all right, how many events have I moved through in the larger block? Okay, so I mean, even if time is an illusion, the important thing to understand is the illusion itself is still real. In other words, your experience of this false sense of time is still really something you're experiencing. You still are moving through the block of time. Even if all of those events in the block of time are really simultaneous, you're still moving through them. So, if that's the case, you know, either that's the case or time is just real. But either way, how many events have you moved through? That's the question. So now that we've gotten past this whole time is an illusion thing, let's ask the larger question. Is there a beginning to this moving through the larger block of time? Well, I want you to imagine, if you will, that Chuck Norris has been counting down from the infinite past, infinity past, eternity past. Chuck Norris has been counting. And Chuck Norris has been counting down, and today he's been counting one number a day for an infinite number of days. And today is the day. Today, November the 20th of 2018 is the day that Chuck Norris finishes, and he says 0. You know, he started with negative infinity, and he kept going, and eventually he got to today, 0, the 0th day. Okay. Why didn't Chuck Norris reach 0 yesterday? Or why doesn't he reach it tomorrow? You begin to see, like, yeah, this kind of mathematically doesn't make sense. Yeah, but I can make it worse for you. Let's say you've been moving through the block of time, and through that block of time, Chuck Norris has been counting one number a day, and Mr. T is sitting in his living room in his chair, and he counts 2 numbers a day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening. So when Chuck Norris counts 1, Mr. T counts 1, 2 on the same day. And when Chuck Norris counts 2 on the second day, Mr. T counts 3, 4. So, no matter what day Chuck Norris is on, Mr. T has doubled the number of days. Okay? So the issue is, alright, after it's a beginningless past and we've reached today, so an infinite number of days have passed, because that's the issue. Every single day would be at the end of an infinitely long number of days. But the thing is, Chuck Norris's count would have to be infinity, but Mr. T's count would also have to be infinity. But that's mathematically impossible, because Mr. T's count would have to be double whatever Chuck Norris's count is, based on the basic properties of how he counted. So there would actually have to be an infinite distance between the two of them. Mr. T would have to be infinitely beyond Chuck Norris, because he's been gaining in improving his lead on Chuck Norris for an infinitely long time. Okay, that's a problem. That's a mathematical problem. I can make it worse for you. I don't know about worse, but here's another problem. How many days passed before today? Oh, an infinite number of days. So you say today is the day, today, and you subtract away all the days before today. That's an infinite number of days. But that would be infinity days minus all of the days, which is infinity days, and you get equals 0 days left. Okay? Alright, so let's say, alright, how about I subtract away all the days before 10 days ago? So how many days passed before 10 days ago? Well, infinity days passed before 10 days ago. So infinity minus infinity equals 10, but also equals 0. Actually, you can make it equal any number you want, even decimals if you want. So you can even make it equal infinity. Let's say that you subtract away all of the odd numbered days and you leave only the even numbered days. So the total number of days is infinity. The odd number of days is infinity. So infinity minus infinity equals infinity. So subtraction would be, what you run into is a logical issue where subtraction must be meaningless and you disprove subtraction, or you cannot have an infinite series of events before today. Okay? So that's the way it works. You know, this is just a logical impossibility. You know, sometimes you come to people and when it comes to this argument based on the beginning, you know, the beginning of time, is they come to you and they say, well, science hasn't proven for sure there's a beginning of time. It looks like the universe has a birthday 13.7 billion years ago. But those first few picoseconds of the universe are really poorly understood. And it's like, yeah, we don't really, you know, this isn't all, you know, hopefully you follow what we said so far. None of that's relevant because what we're doing is based on pure logical reasoning. In other words, it doesn't matter what scientific observations you come up with. There are some things that just logically have to be true, and it doesn't. And if your observations in science don't match up to, you know, pure mathematics, then there's something wrong with the observations. When your logic is airtight. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you have 3 gold watches and you put them in a wooden box and you take the wooden box to your attic and you wait 1 year and you go back up there and you open the wooden box and you observe that there are now 4 gold watches in there. What would you conclude? Well, you would conclude, you know, I don't know, that somebody put one in there. You know, that seems likely. Or maybe you made an error in, you know, maybe you counted wrong before and you actually put 4 in there by accident or something. Okay? Here's what you would never conclude. You would never conclude that the number 3 equals the number 4. That's just logically impossible. Even though that's consistent with your observations, that the number 3 equals the number 4. And scientifically, that's, you know, you say, I have a theory. The theory is that the number 3 equals the number 4, and I've proven that theory with my observations. But it's mathematically impossible. And so it doesn't matter, you know, that this is going to just trump that, you know. And if you have good airtight reasoning, then yeah, you just can't get around it. In fact, the mathematical reasoning that says that the number 3 does not equal the number 4 is so solid that you would conclude that there's some unknown aspect of quantum mechanics that says that, you know, gold watches can spontaneously duplicate, you know, or that there's some sort of biological mechanism that causes a new one to grow, you know, that's unknown yet so far in science. You would conclude anything, you know, anything before 3 equals 4. Okay, so that's where we're going with it. If we're using logical reasoning, you can argue for a first cause of the universe just using the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is really evidence that the universe has a birthday. And so that gets you back to the other question, well, does the universe have a birthday for no reason at all, or did something create the universe? And, you know, the Big Bang in science is essentially the end of, you know, it's science reaching an end of what it can tell us, and it says that this is the beginning of all things physical. But those first few seconds are poorly understood. But we don't have to go there, even though it can be fun to go there. We can just say, well, the series of events before today cannot be infinite into the past. There must be a beginning, because it's mathematically impossible. So then the next question is like, okay, well, if the series of events in the past is infinite, it has a beginning, did our reality, our movement through the block of time, did that event occur for no reason at all? Or did something cause it? Okay? Well, if something caused it, then you could say, well, does that something exist within time? Well, no, because you run into the same problem of it has to have an infinitely long past. No, it has to have a beginning. So eventually you're going to get back to something that just exists somehow outside of the realm of time. So it's funny how they say that, like, there is, reality is really beyond time, and that's their way around this argument, when in reality I'm trying to prove, I am attempting to demonstrate to you, to prove to you, to show with logical demonstration that there exists a cause of the universe that exists beyond time, and that the real reality from which our universe springs is an entity that exists beyond time. So saying that there is no such thing as time and it's only an illusion is kind of exactly what I'm wanting to show to you. But anyway, you could say, well, the universe begins for no reason at all. That runs into all sorts of absurdities, though. You run into all sorts of problems, because if our universe of time and events happening one after the other is something that can just pop into being uncaused for no reason at all, well, if that can happen, then how often does that happen? Well, nothing at all has no properties that would make it specifically do this or that, or even do this more often than it does that. So, like, how often do things happen for no reason at all? Well, nothing has no properties. So, like, let's say you come in your house and you find all of your valuables gone and the door busted in, and would you say that, well, that might have happened for no reason at all? It could have happened for no reason at all. In fact, if things, what are the odds that it happened for no reason at all? There's no way to assess the odds. So, I mean, like, all of science is looking for explanations for things, and all of science would be debunked with this if things could just happen for no reason at all. Some people like to say that, in quantum physics, in the quantum vacuum, which is like empty space, we now are observing that particles pop into being out of empty space. But that's empty space. You're not really observing something happening for no reason at all. You're just observing something happening, and you don't really have an explanation for why it's happening, or you can't observe a physical explanation for why it's happening. But that doesn't mean that there is no explanation. There could very well be some sort of supernatural explanation that is beyond the physical ability, the physical realm, or your empirical ability to, or it could be something physical that you just simply can't observe. So that in no way, demonstrates that. That's just wasting your breath. You would just say that we have not observed a physical explanation for this, but there may be an as of yet unobserved physical explanation. There may be something that is, fundamentally impossible to observe, which would make it supernatural, or nothing at all. But you wouldn't be able to resolve this question with just, observing particles popping into, apparently popping into being out of nothing. So, now, but people do, sometimes people press the whole things can happen for no reason at all. One fella said that, like, this is the way one argument goes on this. They say that, like, well, once the universe comes into existence, the universe that we inhabit has laws that, like, prohibit things from popping into existence within it. Okay, so that brings up a real fundamental philosophical, logical problem. Because how does the universe prevent something that happens for no reason at all? Well, the existence of that universe happened for no reason at all. But, like, even if a bunny rabbit was to pop into being for no reason at all within that universe, how does the universe have laws that it interferes with the thing that pops into being for no reason at all? Because, in other words, like, if things could happen for no reason at all, then nothing can really stop that from happening. Nothing can really interfere with that. So, like, if that universe exists for no reason at all, that can't be stopped. But if that bunny rabbit pops into being within that universe, but the universe has laws that say it has to be able to stop the bunny rabbit, well then, like, which one of those, both of those cannot be stopped. Both of those cannot be done away with, but, like, they have to be done away with. And so you run into this logical problem where, like, this would have to be able to happen. It would have to be impossible for it to happen. And that's another logical problem. That's like, saying that I agree with everyone, even the people who say that everyone else is wrong. You can't do that. You know what I mean? It's just logically absurd. So for example, if the Muslims say that everyone who's not a Muslim is a sinner, and you say I agree with all religions, then you can't possibly do that. That just doesn't make any sense, because you don't agree with the people who disagree with everybody else. Or if it's just logically absurd for something to pop into, the bunny rabbit and the universe both exist for no reason at all, so they can't be stopped from happening if things can happen for no reason at all. But yet one is like an unmovable object of the universe, and the bunny rabbit is like the unstoppable force. And you can't really prevent either of them. So anyway, there you go. What this means is the universe must exist for a reason. There must be a first cause of the universe. One of the funny things about this argument, and one of the most interesting responses I've gotten more than once, is oh, but Ben, there's other people who can refute everything you say. And I'm like, well, quit wasting my time. Go get those other people, or quit wasting your own time. In other words, they're going to bunt and hope that somebody else bats them home. What good is that? If that's really how you reason, and you're just going to bunt to the authorities, then the question becomes you can trot out your atheist authorities who will debunk the Kalam argument, and I can trot out my Christian authorities, but we're going to have to pass judgment on who we think is the correct authority. So you can't really avoid the fact that you have to engage with the argument yourself and with the reasoning yourself, because if you're just going to bunt to the authorities, well, the authorities disagree. So what are you going to do there? You can trot out Richard Dawkins, and I can trot out William Lane Craig, and I can, and then we can assess their characters and their trustworthiness, but we're still judging the quote unquote authorities. Who's the real authority then? You're judging them. So at some point, you're going to have to make up your own mind, look at the information. Now, when it comes to science, you can't go do all the experiments and go to the Grand Canyon and observe the dinosaur bones. And you can't do all, you can't go to the moon. There's things that you can't observe. But I'm giving you logical reasoning for God's existence. The Bible says that the creation proves the Creator's existence. That's what it says in Romans chapter 1. And so that kind of makes sense. If God existed, then we wouldn't have to go look for, you wouldn't find, the evidence for God under a rock somewhere in Israel. God would be the creator and author of all reality. So you're not really asking, when you're asking, does God exist and is there proof? You're not asking for the same kind of proof that you would ask for in a murder trial, or did dinosaurs exist, or did Noah exist? That's a different kind of question, because God's existence would be the building block on which all of reality is founded. He's the creator of all reality. So if God exists, then what you're really asking is two questions. One, does reality exist? And two, what is the nature of reality? What is the inherent nature of reality? Is the inherent nature of reality a personal being, or is it non-personal? Is it just, like a rock? Or is it like a person? Is it an it, or is it an I? That's kind of the question. Is it I am, or is it is? Okay? So that's what we need to move to. We've proven that this first cause must exist. It must exist. It's inescapable. And so if you deny the existence of this first cause, you deny it on the pain of irrationality. In other words, you are irrational. And what we're going to demonstrate with this argument is that atheism is fundamentally illogical, irrational, and stupid. That's really the blunt way to put it. It is incorrect, demonstrably false. that's, a key point. Maybe, a lot of Christian apologists like to tone it down and just try to prove that it's likely that atheism's wrong, because they think that, like, maybe the audience will be more receptive. I don't know if I completely disagree with them, and I don't know if I completely agree with them, but, like, I'll just come out and be honest with you, like, yeah, like, this is a good argument. There's a reason, there's good reasons to believe in God. Okay, so I'm not going to go to the point of proving the Christian God necessarily, but what we'll demonstrate is that there must exist, the first cause must be personal and must be immensely powerful and exist beyond the realm of our time and space. So, like, here we go. Either the first cause of the universe is an I, or it is an it. It is either personal or it is impersonal. Okay, it's either a rock or you're, somebody you would know. A mind. Okay, a disembodied mind. Now, some people say that, like, well, things that exist outside of time cannot interact with anything within time. And that's their response to this. The problem with that response is that outside of time is just kind of the language that we use. We're really talking about that block theory of time. So if this first cause exists, it must be timeless. It must exist at all times at the same time. So, like, it's not really that it exists outside of time. It exists outside of our experience of time. We move through the block, but it experiences the entire block at once. So that would actually explain why God would be able to know all events, because for God, all events are occurring. It's not that God's interfering. It's just that God experiences all of them the way you experience just one at a time. Okay, so God would exist in an eternal present. But the question is it just a thing? Is it just a rock? Well, whatever it is, let's just assume that it's like it's a rock. But this rock has some sort of property that makes it be the first cause of the universe. But since the rock is timeless, its properties must also be timeless. It has timeless properties. So if it's brown, it's timelessly brown. If it weighs 5 pounds, it timelessly weighs 5 pounds. If it causes universes to exist, it timelessly causes universes to exist. So what that means is the universe would timelessly be beginning to exist. But the problem is that the universe, our existence of moving through one, in other words, like, we would never move past the first moment through the block, because we would timelessly be, the first moment of the block would be timelessly being caused. And so our realm of moving through the block of time cannot be caused by an it, because its properties are timeless, so therefore its effects must be timeless. Because it's, in other words, it's an impersonal thing, and its properties cause it to cause things to exist, and since its properties are timeless, therefore its effects must be timeless. The cause is timeless, the effects must be timeless. And so, just through the simple process of elimination, we can rule that out. But we also know that the cause must exist, and the only other option between personal and impersonal is personal. So the being must be some sort of personal mind, but it must not have a beginning, because then we would have to ask, well, what created it? And we would go back to, then we have an infinitely long chain. We have to get back to the first thing. And so that first thing must not have a beginning. Okay, so therefore it's timeless. Well, if it's timeless, then it cannot fail to exist. So it's a personal being that cannot fail to exist. But it also would, like we said, know all events, past, present, and future. They would all be simultaneous for that being. So that being would be aware of all knowledge. It would take no time to gather knowledge, because time would be irrelevant for that being. It would be all-knowing. And so therefore, this being, think about it, like the theology of this being wouldn't actually have to go back and rethink its choices. It would have all information and it would only have to make one choice. or really just sort of be one choice, one thought that comprehensively took into account every event, every fact, everything. And so it would never be surprised by anything or any of that. So we're talking about an all-knowing being that transcends time and transcends space. Because how long would it take to move from one point to another? Well, it would take no time, which would mean it would be at both points, which would mean it would be at all points at the same time, which would mean that it could affect everything timelessly. From this, its effects would be pre-planned, pre-thought out, pre-affected. Nothing would exist. And it's the first cause of our entire realm of existence. And it pre-planned every event of all of our lives. And it cannot fail to exist. And its authority in what it is can't be deleted or defeated because it's timeless. I mean, it has to be timeless. So we're talking about an all-knowing being that's all-powerful, that planned out your life and knows everything, that transcends time and space. It's omnipresent through time and space. So this is why we say that God must exist. This is one of the reasons. The book of Romans tells us that we can, look and at the things God has created and tell that God exists and what God is like. It says that in Romans chapter 1. Well, this is one example of that. Sometimes people like to say, well, that's your only argument. Well, that's the only one you've taken the time to listen to because, you actually took the time to listen this one time. But actually, we have other arguments, and it's very possible that there are many, many more. But anyway, this demonstrates that God must exist. I won't go on any further with that other than to say that there are some ramifications for the existence of this God, because this God would obviously be a personal being that makes choices, and choices necessitate a purpose, having a purpose for the reality that it caused to exist. So this being gives purpose to all of reality. All of reality's purpose flows from this being. And morality, ethics, right and wrong, must flow from the overall purpose for life. So if life and the existence of the universe exists for a reason, then what's good and what's evil and the right choice and the wrong choice must be dependent on that purpose. And this being also is ultimately in control and the determiner of ultimate destiny. So the four big questions in life ultimately are grounded in this being. This being is the cause of all things. It's the origin of all things. It is the purpose giver of all reality in life. It gives life meaning. It gives the morality and the ethics of everyday life, the right and wrong and the do's and don'ts. And it gives the ultimate destiny of all things. All of that is grounded in this being. There must exist such a being. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for your time.